Hi, I'm Sophia. And if you've ever been publicly humiliated by someone who should have loved you, not just criticized behind closed doors, but slapped across the face at your own birthday celebration, then maybe you'll understand why I didn't cry when my mother-in-law's hand struck my cheek. Because by then, she'd already been undermining me for years. She'd poisoned family gatherings, twisted my words to others, and tried to convince my husband I wasn't good enough. But what she didn't know was that on that night, surrounded by witnesses, her mask finally slipped completely off. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The evening had started so beautifully. Soft string lights glowed across our backyard patio, transforming our modest suburban home into something magical. Friends and family mingled in small clusters, wine glasses catching the golden light, laughter rising and falling like music. My 35th birthday, a milestone I'd been looking forward to celebrating. I'd spent days preparing, wanting everything to be perfect. My husband James stood by the grill, spatula in hand. That crooked smile I fell in love with brightening his face whenever our eyes met across the yard. 3 hours in, and Vivian hadn't arrived yet. My mother-in-law was notoriously late to every event I hosted, but never to James's gatherings. A small mercy, I thought. Perhaps she wouldn't come at all. "She's stuck in traffic," James said, appearing at my side with a fresh glass of champagne. "She just texted, said she'll be here soon." I nodded, accepting the glass, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. 6 years of marriage, and I still braced myself whenever Vivian entered a room. The subtle criticisms, the backhanded compliments, the way she'd reminisce about James's ex-girlfriend whenever I was within earshot. "It'll be fine," James whispered, squeezing my hand. "It's your night. Don't let her get to you." Easy for him to say. Vivian Shaw reserved her true nature for moments when her son wasn't watching. To him, she was the doting mother who just wanted the best for her only child. To me, she was the woman who once, accidentally, spilled red wine on my wedding dress an hour before the ceremony. When Vivian finally arrived, she made an entrance. Designer handbag swinging from her arm, stiletto heels somehow navigating our lawn without sinking, her silver blonde hair styled impeccably despite the claimed traffic delays. She carried an elaborately wrapped box almost too large for her to manage alone. "Happy birthday, darling," she cooed, air kissing near my cheek. "Sorry I'm late. The traffic was simply impossible." She glanced around the gathering. "Quaint little party, isn't it?" I smiled tightly. "Thank you for coming, Vivian." I wouldn't miss my daughter-in-law's special day. The emphasis made it clear which word she found hardest to say. "James, darling, help me with this gift." The evening continued, and I found myself relaxing as friends pulled me into conversations, sharing stories and laughter. My best friend May had flown in from Seattle. My sister Emma brought her new baby, whom I hadn't yet met, and colleagues I genuinely enjoyed spending time with filled our home with warmth. For a while, I almost forgot about Vivian. Until the cake. James had arranged for my favorite, a 3-tier lemon cake with raspberry filling from that little bakery downtown we discovered on our third date. As everyone gathered around, singing off-key and laughing, I felt a wave of gratitude. This was happiness. Simple, genuine, surrounded by people who loved me. "Make a wish, babe," James said, his arm around my waist. I closed my eyes, leaned forward, and blew. Cheers erupted, and James pulled me in for a kiss. Not quite the traditional way," Vivian's voice cut through the moment. "In our family, we've always done it differently." Our family. As if I'd never been fully included in that designation. "Mom, not now," James said quietly. "I'm just saying, James, traditions matter, like the Shaw family cake-cutting tradition. Remember how Rebecca always honored that?" Rebecca. the ex-girlfriend Vivian had practically planned a wedding for before James broke it off. I forced a smile. "I'd love to hear about your traditions, Vivian." "Well, since you asked," she said, stepping forward, "in the Shaw family, we believe the birthday honoree should serve the first slice to the matriarch, symbolizing respect for those who came before. A tradition I'd never once heard mentioned in 6 years of birthdays, holidays, and gatherings." "Sounds lovely," I said, picking up the cake knife. "Would you like the first slice, Vivian?" Her smile tightened. This wasn't the resistance she'd expected. "How thoughtful of you to offer." I cut a perfect slice, placed it on a plate, and handed it to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The gathering had gone quiet, the tension palpable. Vivian accepted the plate, examining the slice with critical eyes. "A bit large, don't you think? You know I watch my figure." She set the plate down without taking a bite. "Now, I think it's time for presents, don't you?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before James could intervene, she was already dragging her enormous box to the center of the patio. "Open mine first, darling." The gift was ostentatious. A designer dress 3 sizes too small with the price tag still attached. "I thought you could use something elegant for a change," she explained, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "And it gives you something to work toward size-wise." I felt heat rise in my cheeks but kept my composure. "Thank you, Vivian. It's certainly memorable." "Oh, and one more thing," she added, reaching into her purse. She pulled out an envelope, waving it slightly. "I came across these old photos while cleaning. Thought you might want to see them." James frowned. "Mom, we're celebrating now. Can the photos wait?" "Nonsense! Sophia will want to see these," she insisted, already pulling them out. The photos were from before I met James. Him with Rebecca at various family events, holiday gatherings, vacations. Vivian began passing them around. "Look how happy they were," she sighed. "Such a natural fit with our family." My sister Emma intercepted the photos, quickly stuffing them back in the envelope. "Hey, I think it's time for more cake," she announced loudly, trying to redirect attention. But Vivian wasn't finished. She turned to me, voice dripping with false concern. "I just worry about James, you know. He's always worked so hard, and now with you constantly pushing for children when you can barely manage the house." She gestured vaguely around our meticulously prepared backyard. "It's just not what we pictured for him." The gathering had gone silent. Even the neighborhood sounds, distant lawnmowers, children playing, seemed to have paused. "Vivian," I said quietly, "I think you've said enough." "Excuse me?" Her eyebrows shot up. "I'm only looking out for my son's best interests. Someone has to, since he's too blinded by whatever this is, to see what's happening." James stepped forward. "Mom, stop, now." "James, darling, I'm just being honest. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't speak up when I see you settling for what?" I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "For someone who loves him? For someone who respects him enough to let him make his own choices?" Vivian's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what respect means in this family." "In this family," I echoed. "The family you've made clear I don't belong in, despite 6 years of trying." She stepped closer. "Trying? Is that what you call it? Taking my son away from his home, his traditions, his mother's control?" I finished for her. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. Her palm connected with my cheek with surprising force for a woman her age, the sound cracking through the silent backyard like a gunshot. My head jerked sideways, hair falling across my face, hiding the red mark I could already feel forming. Gasps rippled through our guests. Someone dropped a glass. My sister called out my name, but I didn't move, didn't raise a hand to my stinging cheek. I simply straightened, brushed my hair back, and looked Vivian directly in the eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, letting everyone see what had always happened, in shadows. Sophia! James was at my side instantly, his face a mask of shock and fury. He gently touched my reddened cheek, then turned to his mother. "What the hell, Mom?" Vivian's expression shifted instantly, her eyes widening in practiced innocence. "James, she provoked me. You heard how she spoke to me, in front of everyone, after everything I've done for her, for both of you." James wasn't listening. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Excuse me?" Vivian blinked rapidly, as if she couldn't possibly have heard correctly. "Get out of our home. Now." Each word fell like stone. "James, darling, you can't be serious. She's turning you against me. Don't you see? This is exactly what she's wanted all along." "What I've wanted," I said softly, finding my voice, "was to be accepted by you, to be part of this family. That's all I've ever wanted." Vivian scoffed. "As if you could ever—" "Enough!" James's voice thundered across the yard. Our friends and family stood frozen, witnesses to the implosion of 6 years of tension. "You don't get to speak to her that way. Not now, not ever again." "James Shaw." Vivian's voice took on a warning tone I'd heard her use on him before, the tone that usually made him back down. "Think very carefully about what you're doing right now." He didn't hesitate. "I am. I'm standing by my wife. I'm choosing her, today, tomorrow, and every day after that. After everything I've sacrificed for you, I raised you alone after your father left. I worked 3 jobs to put you through college. This is how you repay me? By expecting you to treat my wife with basic human decency? Yes." Vivian's face contorted with rage. She turned to me, finger pointed accusingly. "This is your doing. You've poisoned him against me." "No, Vivian," I said calmly. "You did that all on your own." She looked around wildly, perhaps only now realizing how many witnesses had seen her true colors. My best friend May stood with her phone partially raised. Had she been recording? My co-workers, James's friends, our neighbors, all watching in stunned silence. "Well," Vivian said, gathering her designer purse with shaking hands, "I can see I'm not welcome here." "That's the first honest thing you've said all night," James replied. She turned to leave, then paused, delivering one final barb over her shoulder. "When she ruins your life, don't come crying to me." And then she was gone, heels clicking down our driveway, car door slamming with excessive force. The silence that followed felt endless, until my sister Emma stepped forward, champagne glass raised. "To Sophia," she announced, "who just received the best birthday gift of all? Freedom from that woman's bullshit." Nervous laughter broke the tension. James pulled me close, his arms strong around me. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against my hair. "I should have stood up to her years ago." I leaned into him, my cheek still stinging, but my heart oddly lighter than it had been in years. "It's okay," I said. "Better late than never." The party gradually resumed, though conversations were hushed and glances of concern were thrown my way throughout the evening. By the time the last guest left, the sky had darkened to deep indigo, and I was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. James found me in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher in silence. "Leave that," he said gently. "It can wait until tomorrow." I nodded but continued rinsing a plate. 6 years, James. 6 years of comments and criticisms and accidental insults. And all it took was one slap in front of witnesses for you to finally see it. He flinched as if I'd struck him. "I know. I should have believed you." All those times you told me what she said when I wasn't around, I thought you were just sensitive to her ways, that you were misinterpreting. Gaslighting, I said quietly. That's what it's called when someone makes you doubt your own reality. And I helped her do that to you. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I set down the plate and turned to face him. Why tonight? What was different about tonight that made you finally stand up to her? He leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't just tonight. It's been building for months. Remember Christmas, when she accidentally excluded you from the family photo? Or Easter, when she brought Rebecca to dinner, without warning anyone? Each time I told myself she didn't mean it, that she just needed time to adjust. He looked up, meeting my eyes. But tonight, seeing her hit you, something just snapped. Suddenly, I saw every moment I'd dismissed or explained away, and I couldn't do it anymore. I nodded slowly. What happens now? Now, he said, taking my hands in his, we set boundaries, real ones, and if she can't respect them, she doesn't get to be part of our lives. Part of me wanted to believe it would be that simple. Another part, the part that had endured 6 years of Vivian's subtle warfare, knew better. She'll fight back, I warned. She always does. Let her try, James said with newfound resolve. I won't let her hurt you again. That night, as I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed with a text message. From Vivian. I hope you're happy now that you've turned my son against me. This isn't over. I showed James, who immediately called his mother despite the late hour. I could hear her voice through the phone, high-pitched and defensive. You threatened my wife, he said flatly, after physically assaulting her at her birthday party. More shrill protestations from the other end. No, Mom, I'm not interested in your version of events. Everyone saw what happened. If you can't apologize sincerely and change your behavior, then we need space from you. A lot of space. He listened for a moment, then his face hardened. That's your choice. Goodbye, Mom. He hung up and turned to me. She says she's cutting us off financially. I raised an eyebrow. We both have good jobs. We don't need her. Money? No, but... He hesitated. The down payment for this house. She helped us with that. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What are you saying? Nothing, he said quickly. We'll figure it out. I just thought you should know what we're dealing with. I sat up, suddenly alert. James, did she put her name on our mortgage? On the deed? His silence was answer enough. Oh my God. I pressed my hands to my face. She owns part of our home? The home you promised was ours alone? It's complicated, he admitted. When we were buying the place, the market was so competitive. We needed extra cash to make our offer stand out. She offered to help, but there were conditions. What kind of conditions? My voice had gone dangerously quiet. He couldn't meet my eyes. She's a co-signer on the mortgage, and technically she owns 20% of the property. The revelation hit me like a second. Slap. All this time, living in what I thought was our sanctuary, our fresh start. And Vivian had held the keys all along. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. I didn't want you to worry. She promised it was just a formality, that she'd never interfere. I laughed bitterly. And you believed her? After everything? I wanted to, he admitted. She's my mother, Sophia. I wanted to believe she had our best interests at heart. I got out of bed, needing space, needing air. All those times she showed up unannounced, the comments about her investment in our future. She wasn't just being controlling, she was asserting ownership. James reached for me. We'll fix this. I promise. First thing tomorrow, We'll talk to a lawyer. I nodded mechanically, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about a slap anymore. This was about reclaiming our lives from the ground up. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my cheek still tender where Vivian's ring had caught my skin. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint our backyard. The same backyard where everything had changed hours earlier. James found me there, still in my robe, staring into a cold cup of coffee. "You didn't sleep," he said. It wasn't a question. How could I? Finding out your mother literally owns part of our home isn't exactly conducive to peaceful rest. He sat across from me, looking as exhausted as I felt. I called Tony. "Your lawyer friend?" He nodded. "He's meeting us at 10. Says we have options." Options. Such a small, hopeful word for such a massive problem. "I also called the bank," he continued. "There might be a way to refinance, remove her from the mortgage. It would be expensive, but worth every penny," I finished. His phone buzzed. A text. Then another. And another. His expression darkened as he read them. "What now?" I asked. "She's telling everyone her version of what happened. That you verbally attacked her, threatened her, that she acted in self-defense." I should have been surprised. I wasn't. "Who's she telling?" "Everyone. My cousins, our mutual friends. She even texted my boss, apparently." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "And she's called a family meeting for tonight. Says it's about her concerns for my well-being under your influence." The Vivian Shaw damage control playbook, executed perfectly. I'd seen it deployed against others who crossed her over the years, friends who questioned her behavior, relatives who stood up to her manipulation. She was ruthlessly efficient at rewriting narratives, positioning herself as the victim, isolating her targets. "She's trying to isolate us," I said. "Turn people against me. Make you choose." "It won't work," James insisted. But we both knew that wasn't necessarily true. Vivian had decades of relationship currency with these people. I was the newcomer, the outsider. Her story, of the manipulative daughter-in-law who turned her beloved son against her, would find fertile ground among those predisposed to believe her. "We need evidence," I said suddenly. "What?" "Evidence. Proof of what really happened." I thought back to the party. May had her phone out. I think she might have recorded the slap. James was already texting her. Within minutes, we had our answer. Yes, May had recorded almost the entire confrontation, starting from Vivian's comments about the dress. The video was clear, unmistakable. Vivian's cutting remarks, my measured responses, the unprovoked slap, her subsequent attempts to paint herself as the victim. "Send it to me," James replied, "and anyone else who you think recorded anything." By noon, we had collected 3 different videos of the incident from different angles, plus dozens of text messages from witnesses offering statements if needed. We forwarded everything to Tony, who called back almost immediately. "This is good," he said. "Very good. Not just for countering her narrative, but potentially for legal action if needed." "Legal action?" I repeated. "You mean, like, pressing charges?" "That's one option," Tony confirmed. "But I was thinking more along the lines of protection for your property interests. If she's threatening to use her co-ownership of your home as leverage, we have options to address that, especially given her demonstrated hostility." The meeting with Tony clarified our path forward. We could file for a forced partition by sale, essentially, forcing Vivian to sell her interest in our home. It would be expensive and potentially contentious, but it would sever her control. Alternatively, we could refinance and buy her out, though that would require her cooperation. "She'll never agree to either option," James said as we left Tony's office. "She'll fight us every step of the way." "Then we fight back," I said, surprising myself with my resolve. For 6 years, I tried to win her approval. I bent over backward to accommodate her demands, tolerated her insults, made excuses for her behavior. I'm done playing that game. James looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. This won't be easy. She fights dirty. So we'll be prepared. I squeezed his hand. Together. The family meeting Vivian had called was scheduled for 7 that evening at her expansive colonial home in the historic district, the house where James had grown up, where family gatherings had always been held on Vivian's terms. We don't have to go, James offered as we sat in our car outside her house, watching other family members arrive. We could just drive away, deal with this another time. I shook my head. No, that's what she expects, that I'll hide, that I'll be too ashamed or intimidated to face her and her supporters. I'm done hiding. The atmosphere inside was exactly as predicted. Vivian sat at the head of her dining table like a queen holding court, eyes red-rimmed from what were almost certainly tactical tears. James's cousins, his aunt and uncle, friends of the family, all gathered around, expressions ranging from confused to openly hostile when we entered. James, Vivian's voice wavered perfectly. I wasn't sure you'd come. You called a family meeting about us, he replied evenly. Of course we came. His Aunt Patricia immediately moved to Vivian's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Perhaps this isn't the best time. Vivian's been through quite an ordeal. An ordeal, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it when someone physically assaults another person at their birthday party? Murmurs rippled through the dining room. Vivian's carefully cultivated image as the gracious matriarch wavered slightly as several pairs of eyes turned toward her, then back to my still visible cheek where a faint bruise had begun to form beneath my hastily applied concealer. That's hardly a fair characterization, Vivian sniffed, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. In the heat of the moment, after severe provocation, we have videos, James interrupted, his voice steady. Multiple videos from different guests showing exactly what happened. A beat of silence. Vivian's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. Videos can be misleading, she countered. They don't show the months of disrespect, the way she's systematically turned you against your own family. I stepped forward. Would anyone like to see the footage? Judge for yourselves? Patricia's hand tightened on Vivian's shoulder. That won't be necessary. We're here to support Vivian during this difficult time. What difficult time? James asked, incredulity creeping into his voice. The difficult time where she physically assaulted my wife and is now trying to manipulate all of you into taking her side? James, his uncle Walter interjected, you've always had a blind spot when it comes to your mother. She's done everything. For you. Has she? I cut in. Or has she done everything to control him? The room tensed. Cousin Rachel, who'd always been slightly more independent from Vivian's influence, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Maybe we should watch the videos, she suggested quietly. Vivian shot her a look of pure betrayal. Rachel, please, this isn't about videos. This is about family loyalty. Exactly, I agreed, surprising everyone. Family loyalty. Which is why I've spent 6 years trying to build a relationship with a woman who has undermined me at every turn, who has criticized everything, from my appearance to my career to my housekeeping, who showed up at my birthday party with photos of James's ex-girlfriend and a dress 3 sizes too small as gifts. James's cousin Michael frowned. Wait, what? Mom said this was about Sophia having some kind of breakdown and attacking Vivian. Several heads turned toward Vivian, whose cheeks had flushed crimson. Well, that's certainly one creative interpretation, I said dryly. I turned to James. Show them. Without hesitation, James pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to Michael. The group gathered around, watching in silence as the scene unfolded exactly as it had happened. Vivian's cutting remarks, the dress, the photos of Rebecca, her escalating insults, and finally, the unmistakable crack of her palm against my face. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. "Jesus, Vivian," Walter finally muttered, running a hand over his balding head. "You told us she attacked you." "She attacked me with her words," Vivian protested, voice rising. "You can't possibly understand what it's like watching your only son throw his life away on someone who—" "Who what?" James demanded. "Who loves me? Who supports my dreams instead of trying to mold me into what you want me to be? Who has put up with your cruelty for years without complaint?" Patricia released Vivian's shoulder and stepped back slightly. "Viv, you said she threatened you." "She did," Vivian insisted. "Maybe not in that moment, but she's always threatening me. Threatening my relationship with my son. Threatening our family traditions." "By existing?" I asked quietly. "Is that my threat, Vivian? That I simply exist in James's life?" "More." Uncomfortable glances exchanged around the room. The narrative Vivian had carefully constructed was unraveling thread by thread. "I think," Rachel said slowly, "we may have been misled about the purpose of this meeting." Vivian's eyes darted around the room, sensing the shift in allegiance. Like a cornered animal, she lashed out at the nearest target. "You're all so easily fooled? She's manipulated all of you, just like she's manipulated James. Tell them about the money, James. Tell them how she's been after the family fortune from day one." James's expression hardened. "You mean the money you held over our heads? The 20% stake in our home that you never told Sophia about? The financial leash you've kept us on?" Another round of surprised murmurs. Walter turned to Vivian. "You co-own their house? You said you just helped with the down payment as a gift." "It was a gift," Vivian insisted, "with conditions, reasonable conditions to protect my investment." "To protect your control," I corrected. "And now you're threatening to use that control to punish us because James finally stood up to you." Vivian stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. "This meeting is over. I will not sit here and be attacked in my own home by an ungrateful—" "Sit down, Vivian." The command came from an unexpected source. Margaret, James's 85-year-old grandmother, who until now had remained silent in the corner. She rarely attended family functions anymore, but apparently Vivian had deemed this emergency significant enough to summon even the family matriarch. To everyone's surprise, including her own it seemed, Vivian sat. Margaret adjusted her glasses and fixed her daughter-in-law with a penetrating stare. "I've sat back for years watching you manipulate this family. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. That was a mistake." Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "When my son, God rest his soul, married you, I had my concerns," Margaret continued, her voice strengthening. "But I kept them to myself out of respect for his choice. I watched you isolate him from his friends, from his passions. I watched you mold James into your vision of the perfect son. And now I've watched you try to destroy his marriage because you can't stand not being the center of his world." "Margaret, please," Vivian whispered, eyes darting around the room. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Margaret turned to James and me. "And I think it's time I corrected a misunderstanding about the family finances." A strange expression crossed Vivian's face, something between panic and fury. "The trust fund," Margaret said calmly. "The one Vivian has lorded over James his entire life. It was never entirely in her control." Vivian shot to her feet again. "Margaret, this is hardly the time or place." "On the contrary," Margaret countered. "It's exactly the time and place. My late husband left specific instructions. The family trust was to be managed by Vivian until James turned 35, at which point control would transfer directly to him." James stared at his grandmother. "What? I never knew that." "Of course you didn't," Margaret said sadly, "because Vivian never told you. You turned 35 3 months ago, James. The trust is yours now. All of it. The room erupted in chaos. Vivian's face contorted with rage and fear. You had no right. Those papers were private. Those papers were filed with the family. Attorney, Margaret replied calmly. I received notification when the transfer date approached. I assumed you would handle it appropriately. She sighed. I see now that was naive of me. I felt James stiffen beside me. Is this true? He asked his mother. Have you been lying about the trust all this time? Vivian's expression shifted rapidly between rage, calculation, and finally, an attempt at motherly concern. I was protecting you, darling. You weren't ready for that responsibility. I was going to tell you when the time was right. When would that be? I asked. When he was obedient enough? When I was out of the picture? You don't understand our family, Vivian hissed. I understand more than you think, I replied. I understand that you've used money to control James his entire life. I understand that you helped with our house not out of generosity, but to maintain your grip on us. And I understand that you're terrified right now because your leverage is disappearing. The family watched in stunned silence as decades of carefully constructed manipulation unraveled before their eyes. James, Vivian pleaded, switching tactics, her voice suddenly soft and wounded. After everything I've sacrificed for you, all the nights I went without so you could have everything, how can you let her turn you against me like this? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old doubt cross James's face, the lifetime of conditioning that made him vulnerable to her guilt trips. I held my breath. Then he straightened his shoulders. Mom, I love you. I always will. But this has to stop. The manipulation, the control, the attempts to undermine my marriage, all of it. I've only ever wanted what's best for you, she insisted. No, he said gently. You've wanted what's best for you. There's a difference. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Family members shifted awkwardly, some unable to meet anyone's eyes, others watching the drama unfold with undisguised fascination. So what happens now? Walter finally asked, breaking the silence. James took my hand. Now, Sophia and I are going to speak with the family attorney tomorrow about the trust and about removing Mom's name from our house deed. And then we're going to set some boundaries that should have been established years ago. Boundaries, Vivian repeated, as if the word itself was offensive. Yes, I said. Healthy boundaries, like not showing up unannounced at our home, not criticizing me at every opportunity, not trying to sabotage our marriage. And if I refuse these boundaries? Vivian asked, chin lifted defiantly. James's grip tightened on my hand. Then we'll have to limit our contact until you can respect them. You would choose her over your own mother? The hurt in Vivian's voice sounded almost genuine. I'm choosing my wife and our future together, James replied. I'm choosing a healthy relationship over a controlling one, and I'm choosing to break the cycle of manipulation that's defined this family for too long. Margaret nodded approvingly from her corner. It's about time someone did. We left shortly after, the gathering dissolving into smaller clusters of whispered conversations. As we walked to our car, I could feel the weight of what had just happened settling over us both. Do you think she'll fight the trust transfer? I asked as James started the engine. Probably, he sighed. But according to Grandma, it's already legally done. She just hasn't implemented it. We drove in silence for several minutes, the streetlights casting rhythmic patterns across the dashboard. I keep thinking about all the times she held money over my head, James finally said. College tuition that would be withdrawn if I chose the wrong major. The down payment on our house that came with strings attached. The way she'd mention her will whenever I disagreed with her. Financial abuse, I said quietly. That's what it's called. He nodded slowly. I never saw it that way. I thought she was being generous, just with conditions. That's how abusers work, I replied. They disguise control as care. They make you feel grateful for the chains they place on you. We pulled into our driveway, the house dark and quiet after the emotional tumult of the evening. As we walked to the front door, James paused. "This is still our home," he said firmly. "No matter what legal paperwork says right now. And we're going to make sure it stays that way." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. James spent hours on the phone with the family attorney, confirming Margaret's revelation about the trust and initiating the process to formally document the transfer. I worked remotely, trying to focus on project deadlines instead of the seismic shifts occurring in our personal lives. Around noon, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach clenched. It was a photo of me, clearly taken without my knowledge, walking into our lawyer's office that morning. Beneath it, a single line of text. "Careful where you step. The higher you climb, the harder you fall." I showed it to James, who immediately called his mother. It went straight to voicemail. "That's her burner phone," he explained, showing me the unfamiliar number. "The one she uses when she doesn't want calls traced back to her. She's had it for years." "Should we be worried?" I asked, staring at the threatening message. He ran, a hand through his hair. "I don't know. She's never gone this far before." We decided to document the text and forward it to our attorney, adding it to the growing file of Vivian's concerning behavior. By late afternoon, we had received more unexpected support. Rachel called to apologize for not seeing Vivian's manipulation sooner, and even Walter sent an awkward but sincere text expressing his regret over his initial reaction. But the most surprising call came from Margaret, who invited us to tea the following day. "There are some things you both should know," she said cryptically. "Things that might help you understand, though not excuse, Vivian's behavior." We arrived at Margaret's modest apartment in a senior living community the next afternoon. Unlike Vivian's carefully curated showplace of a home, Margaret's space was genuinely welcoming. Comfortable furniture worn smooth from use, walls lined with family photos spanning generations, potted plants thriving on every windowsill. "Thank you for coming," she said, ushering us into her small living room where a tea service awaited. "I've been thinking about what happened, about all of it, and I realize I've been complicit through my silence." "Grandma, you don't have to," James began. Margaret raised a hand. "I do. I've watched Vivian's behavior for decades, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere. That was a mistake, and I'm sorry for it." She poured tea into delicate cups with steady hands despite her age. "What you need to understand about Vivian is that she comes from a place of profound insecurity. When she married your father, James, she was desperate to be accepted by our family. We were established, respected in the community. Her family was not." "I never knew that," James said. "She always talked about her family as if they were practically royalty." Margaret smiled. "Sadly, another fiction she created. In reality, her father was an alcoholic who abandoned them when she was 12. Her mother worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat. Vivian clawed her way out of poverty through sheer determination, reinventing herself along the way." I cradled my teacup, absorbing this new information. "That explains some things, but it doesn't excuse how she's treated me." "No, it doesn't," Margaret agreed. "But it might help you understand why she's so threatened by you, Sophia. You represent everything she fought to become: educated, confident, independent. And unlike her, you didn't have to erase your past or create a false persona to achieve it." James leaned forward. "But why the financial control? Why hold the trust over my head all these years?" "Because money was how she measured her worth," Margaret explained. "It was tangible proof that she'd escaped her origins. Controlling the family finances gave her the security she never had growing up." She set down her cup. "When my son died, Her grip on those purse strings tightened even further. I think she was terrified of returning to the poverty of her childhood. "So, what do we do with this information?" I asked. "It helps me understand her better, but it doesn't change the fact that she's still trying to sabotage our marriage." Margaret reached across the coffee table and took my hand. "You set firm boundaries, as you've already begun to do. You protect yourselves legally from her financial manipulation. But perhaps knowing her history might help you approach the situation with a measure of compassion alongside your justified anger." "Compassion," I repeated, testing the word against my lingering resentment. "Not for her sake," Margaret clarified. "For yours. Carrying anger, however justified, becomes its own burden over time." We left Margaret's with much to consider. In the car, James was quiet, processing this new perspective on his mother's behavior. "It doesn't make what she did okay," he finally said as we neared home. "No," I agreed. "But it makes her a bit more human. Less of a monster, more of a wounded person who never healed properly." He glanced at me. "How are you so understanding after everything she's put you through?" I considered the question carefully. "Understanding doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It just means I can see the broken person behind the behavior." I paused. "But seeing her wounds doesn't mean I have to let her wound me." The next few days brought a flurry of legal activity. The family attorney confirmed that the trust had indeed transferred to James upon his 35th birthday, though Vivian had neglected to implement the change. With the proper documentation now filed, James had full control of the assets, including enough to buy out Vivian's stake in our house. When we presented her with the buyout offer through our attorney, her response was predictable: outrage, followed by threats, followed by attempted emotional manipulation. But with her financial leverage neutralized and family support eroding, her options were limited. "She's backed into a corner," Tony warned us during a follow-up meeting. "That's when people like Vivian are most dangerous. Be prepared for her to escalate before she accepts defeat." He was right. The escalation came that weekend when we returned home from grocery shopping to find Vivian sitting in our living room, flipping through our mail. "How did you get in?" James demanded, shopping bags still in hand. She held up a key. "I had one made when the locks were installed. I am part owner after all." I set my bags down carefully, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "Not for much longer. You received our buyout offer." "A pittance," she scoffed. "This house is worth far more now than when you purchased it." "The offer is more than generous," James countered. 20% of current market value, not original purchase price." Vivian stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks. "I've been thinking about our little situation. Perhaps I don't want to sell my share at all. Perhaps I'd prefer to maintain my investment." Her smile was razor sharp. "After all, I do so enjoy visiting." I felt a chill at her words, at the implied threat of continued intrusion into our space. "That's not going to happen," James said firmly. "If you won't accept the buyout, we'll proceed with a forced partition sale through the courts. Either way, your name comes off our house." Her expression hardened. "Always so ungrateful. After everything I've done for you." "This isn't about gratitude," I interjected. "It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about building a marriage without your interference." She turned to me, eyes cold. "You think you've won, don't you? Turned my son against me, taken control of his inheritance, pushing me out of my rightful place in his life." "No one has won anything," I replied evenly. "This isn't a competition, Vivian. It never was, except in your mind." "We'd like you to leave now," James added, moving toward the door. "And I'll need that key." She clutched it tighter. "And if I refuse?" "Then we call the police and report you for trespassing," he said without hesitation. "Your choice." For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might force the confrontation to its ugliest conclusion. Then, with deliberate slowness, she placed the key on our coffee table. "This isn't over," she said as she walked to the door. "Families are forever, Sophia. Marriages, well, those can be so fragile." After she left, we immediately called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. But her words lingered in the air like a toxic cloud, her implied threat hanging over us. "We should document this," I said, already typing notes about the encounter. "Add it to the file." James nodded, but his expression was troubled. "Do you think she's right? That this will never be over?" I set my phone down and took his hands. "It's over when we decide it's over. When we stop allowing her actions to control our reactions. When we build our life so solidly that her attempts to shake our foundation just don't work anymore." He pulled me into an embrace. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time your mother slapped me at my birthday party," I replied with a small smile. Nothing like public humiliation to clarify one's priorities. That evening, as we prepared dinner together in our newly secured home, I felt something shift within me. A weight lifting, a space opening. For 6 years, I had contorted myself trying to win Vivian's approval, had second-guessed my every word and action around her, had absorbed her criticisms and swallowed my responses. No more. The slap that was meant to put me in my place had, instead, freed me from it. The public humiliation she intended had exposed her true nature to everyone. Her attempt to assert dominance had revealed her weakness. As I chopped vegetables for our stir-fry, I realized I was humming. Something I hadn't done in our kitchen for months. Too tense from Vivian's unannounced visits and critical assessments of my homemaking. "You seem different," James observed, stirring sauce at the stove. "I feel different," I admitted. "Lighter, somehow." He nodded thoughtfully. "Me too, like I've set down something heavy I didn't even realize I was carrying." "Your mother's expectations," I suggested. "And my own. Fear of disappointing her." He poured the sauce into a bowl. "I spent my whole life trying to earn her approval, never realizing it was designed to be unattainable. There was always another hoop to jump through, another standard to meet." I added the chopped vegetables to the wok, listening to them sizzle. "What do you think happens now?" He considered the question. "Honestly, I think she'll fight the buyout as long as possible, try to maintain that foothold in our lives. She'll attempt to turn family members back to her side. She'll look for new ways to exert control. And if she can't, then she'll either adapt to the new boundaries or she'll reduce contact." He stirred the vegetables. "Either way, we'll be okay." "Yes," I agreed, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. "We will." The meeting with our attorney the following Monday brought unexpected news. Tony greeted us with unusual formality, waiting until we were seated in his office before sliding a thick manila envelope across his desk. "Vivian's response to our buyout offer," he explained. "It's not what we anticipated." James reached for the envelope, but Tony placed a hand on it. "Before you open this, I should prepare you. She's not just refusing the buyout, she's countersuing." My stomach dropped. "For what?" "Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and, this is the creative part, elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" James's voice rose in disbelief. "She's 58 years old and runs 5 miles every morning." Tony nodded grimly. "The age threshold for elder abuse statutes in our state is 55. She's claiming you've engaged in a campaign to isolate her from family, diminish her authority, and deprive her of property rights. All textbook elder abuse claims, technically speaking." I sat back, stunned. "That's exactly what she's done. To us." "Projection," Tony agreed. "It's a common tactic. Accuse others of what you yourself are doing." James opened the envelope, scanning the legal documents with growing incredulity. She's requesting a temporary restraining order against both of us, claiming we've threatened her. It gets worse, Tony said. She's petitioning for temporary control of the trust assets pending litigation, claiming you're emotionally unfit to manage them due to my alleged influence. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 6 years of microaggressions, of swallowing my responses, of trying to maintain peace, and now I was being painted as an abuser. This is insane, James muttered, still reading. She claims Sophia manipulated everyone at the family meeting? That the videos were selectively edited? Tony nodded. She's building a narrative where she's the victim and you two are the aggressors. It's thin legally, but emotionally potent. Family courts sometimes respond to these kinds of claims, especially from a parent alleging mistreatment by adult children. What do we do? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. We fight back, Tony said simply. We have evidence, we have witnesses, we have the legal right to the trust. But I won't sugarcoat this. It's going to get uglier before it gets better. We left Tony's office with a battle plan and heavy hearts. In the parking lot, James pulled me into a fierce embrace. I'm so sorry, he whispered against my hair. I never thought she'd go this far. I clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. It's not your fault. We always knew she wouldn't give up control easily. But elder abuse? He pulled back, meeting my eyes. She's trying to destroy your reputation, your career. If these allegations go public, then we face them, I said firmly. With the truth, with our evidence, with the support of those who know better. His phone buzzed, another text from Vivian. He showed me the screen. It's not too late to fix this, James. All you have to do is come home. Without her. Home. As if her house was still his true residence. As if our marriage was a temporary deviation from his real life. The message epitomized everything wrong with her worldview. I am home, James murmured, shutting off his phone. The legal proceedings moved with excruciating slowness. Each filing triggered a counter-motion. Each hearing spawned new accusations. Vivian's attorneys, she had hired 3, submitted affidavits from concerned family members, attesting to her deteriorating mental health following our campaign of isolation. The family doctor, who had known her for 20 years, suddenly discovered symptoms of anxiety and depression that he attributed to our actions. It was a masterclass in manipulation, one that might have succeeded if not for our preparation. For every accusation, we had documentation. For every alleged incident of abuse, we had time-stamped evidence showing exactly what had occurred. And crucially, we had Margaret, the family matriarch whose testimony about Vivian's long history of controlling behavior carried significant weight with the court. Still, the process took its toll. My work performance suffered as I balanced court appearances with professional responsibilities. James developed insomnia, often sitting up late into the night reviewing legal documents. We both jumped whenever the doorbell rang, half expecting another surprise visit despite our changed locks. We need a break, I announced one Friday evening, finding James once again hunched over case files at our dining table. Just one night where we don't talk about the case, don't think about Vivian, don't strategize or worry. He looked up, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. Is that even possible at this point? It has to be, I insisted. We can't let this consume us. That's what she wants, for this fight to become our entire relationship. He rubbed his face wearily. You're right. What did you have in mind? That night, we drove an hour out of the city to a small bed and breakfast we'd visited early in our relationship. The owners remembered us, welcoming us with warm smiles and no knowledge of our current troubles. We walked along the nearby lake, had dinner at a tiny restaurant where no one knew our names, and for a few precious hours remembered who we were beyond this conflict. Under a canopy of stars sitting on the B&B's back porch, James took my hand. Thank you for this. for reminding me there's a world outside of what we're going through. I leaned against his shoulder. Sometimes you have to step away from the battlefield to remember what you're fighting for. And what are we fighting for? He asked softly. I considered the question. Freedom, I finally said. The freedom to build our life without manipulation or control. The freedom to make our own choices, our own mistakes. The freedom to be partners without her interference. He nodded slowly. I've never really had that. Even when I thought I was making independent decisions, I was always calculating her response, anticipating her disapproval. That's what makes this fight worth it, I said. Not just for us, but for our future children, if we decide to have them. Breaking the cycle. Matters. Children. We'd discussed them theoretically before, but always with an unspoken awareness of what Vivian's involvement might mean. The thought of raising children under her critical eye, subject to her manipulation, had silently influenced our timeline. I'd never let her treat our children the way she treated me, James said firmly, clearly following the same train of thought. I know. I squeezed his hand. That's why we're setting these boundaries now, before they arrive. We returned home. The next day renewed, more certain than ever that the difficult path we'd chosen was the right one. The weight of the legal battle still pressed upon us, but we carried it differently now, as a temporary burden rather than a permanent condition. That perspective proved crucial as the case dragged into its third month. Vivian's legal team employed every delay tactic available, hoping to drain our resources and resolve. What they didn't count on was the support network that had gradually formed around us. Rachel, James's cousin, connected us with her husband's law firm, which offered to help pro bono after hearing about the case. Walter, initially aligned with Vivian, switched sides after discovering she had manipulated similar financial arrangements with his own son. Even Patricia, Vivian's staunchest defender, began to question the scorched-earth legal strategy that was dividing the family. The turning point came unexpectedly, through May of all people. My best friend had been digging through old social media posts for an unrelated project when she discovered something significant. Dozens of deleted posts from Vivian's account spanning the past 7 years, many featuring thinly veiled criticisms of me, references to her financial control over James, and explicit statements about her determination to protect her son from my influence. She didn't delete them properly, May explained, showing us the recovered cache. Just hid them from her timeline. They're still in the platform's archive. These digital breadcrumbs provided a timeline of Vivian's escalating attempts to undermine our relationship, directly contradicting her court testimony about being a supportive mother-in-law, blindsided by our sudden hostility. When our attorney submitted them as evidence, the judge's patience with Vivian's narrative noticeably thinned. Your client's credibility is increasingly in question, counselor, he told Vivian's lead attorney during a particularly contentious hearing. These social media posts directly contradict her sworn testimony about the nature of her relationship with the defendants. For the first time since the legal battle began, I felt the momentum shift in our favor. Vivian must have sensed it too, because her tactics suddenly changed. Rather than continuing the frontal assault through the courts, she pivoted to a more personal approach. It started with flowers delivered to our home, an elaborate arrangement with a card expressing Vivian's deep concern for James's well-being and her hope for healing our family divisions. When that received no response, she began appearing at places she knew James frequented, his favorite coffee shop, the gym where he worked out, even outside his office building. Never approaching directly, always maintaining just enough distance to avoid violating harassment laws, but making her presence known. A psychological siege designed to wear him down through constant reminder of her presence. She's trying to force a direct confrontation, Tony warned when we reported these incidents. Don't engage. Document everything, but don't respond. Easier said than done, especially when Vivian escalated to leaving tearful voicemails at 2 a.m., sending daily emails reminiscing about James's childhood. And finally, the nuclear option, showing up at our door one Sunday morning with a pastor from her church to facilitate healing dialogue. James answered the door in his pajamas, coffee mug in hand. I stood behind him, already documenting the encounter on my phone. "Mom," he said flatly, "this is inappropriate." "I'm here with Pastor Williams," she explained, gesturing to the uncomfortable-looking man beside her. "He specializes in family reconciliation." "We have a restraining order pending," James reminded her. "This could be considered a violation." The pastor shifted awkwardly. "Mrs. Shaw, you didn't mention a legal situation. It's all a misunderstanding," Vivian interjected quickly. "Just a family disagreement that's gotten out of hand." "A family disagreement that includes you slapping Sophia at her birthday party?" James asked. "Or the lawsuit you filed against us? Or the false accusations of elder abuse?" Pastor Williams's eyes widened. "I think I should leave." "Please wait," Vivian implored, grabbing his arm. "This is exactly why we need mediation. They've twisted everything, painted me as some kind of monster." "No one had to paint anything," I said quietly, stepping forward. "Your actions speak for themselves." The pastor gently disengaged from Vivian's grip. "Mrs. Shaw, I can't in good conscience participate in this situation. It clearly requires professional legal resolution, not pastoral mediation." As he walked back to his car, Vivian's carefully constructed facade crumbled. "See what you've done," she hissed, all pretense of reconciliation evaporating. "Turned even my church against me." "You did that yourself," James replied evenly. "Just like you're doing right now." "I will never stop fighting for you," she declared, voice rising. "Never stop trying to save you from her influence." "I don't need saving," he said. "I need my mother to respect my choices, my marriage, and my boundaries. If you can't do that, then this conversation is over." He closed the door firmly but not aggressively. We stood in silence, listening to her footsteps retreat down our walkway, the car door slam, the engine start. "She's getting desperate," I observed. James nodded. "Which makes her more dangerous but also more likely to make mistakes." The mistake came 3 days later. In her desperation to regain control, Vivian crossed a line that even her attorneys couldn't defend. She contacted my employer, the university where I worked as a research coordinator, alleging financial improprieties in my handling of grant funds. It was a calculated attack targeting my professional reputation, designed to create enough doubt that I would be placed on administrative leave during an investigation. What Vivian hadn't counted on was my department chair's unwavering support and the university's thorough documentation protocols that quickly disproved her accusations. But the damage was done. By attempting to destroy my career, Vivian had provided exactly the evidence we needed to establish a pattern of deliberate harm. When our attorney filed for an emergency hearing based on this new development, the court finally granted the restraining order we'd sought for months. More significantly, the judge issued a preliminary ruling on the property dispute. Vivian would be required to accept our buyout offer for her stake in our home, at the price determined by an independent appraiser. The trust remained firmly under James's control, with no restrictions. It should have felt like victory. Instead, as we left the courthouse, I felt a complex mixture of relief, exhaustion, and an unexpected thread of sadness. "Are you okay?" James asked as we walked to the car. I nodded slowly. "I'm just thinking about what all this has cost, not financially, but emotionally. The relationships damaged, the energy expended, the stress we've endured, all because one person couldn't respect boundaries." "Do you regret standing up to her?" "Not for a second," I said firmly. "But I regret that it had to happen at all. that we couldn't find a peaceful resolution. He opened my car door, then paused. You know, for all her flaws, I still love her. She's my mother. I probably always will love her in some way. I know, I said gently. And that's okay. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting their harmful behavior. As we drove home, I reflected on the journey from that moment of public humiliation at my birthday party to this hard-won legal victory. The path had been more difficult than I could have imagined, but it had also revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Resilience in the face of attacks on my character, determination when confronted with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, compassion even towards someone who had tried to destroy me. Most importantly, it had transformed my marriage. James and I had moved from a partnership shadowed by his mother's influence to one defined by mutual support and shared purpose. We had faced her together, neither wavering nor allowing her to drive a wedge between us. At home, we found an unexpected delivery waiting on our porch, a small package from Margaret. Inside was a delicate silver photo frame containing an old photograph of Vivian holding infant James, her expression one of genuine love and wonder. The accompanying note read simply, "Remember that beneath the behavior is a broken person who doesn't know how to love properly. Your boundaries are necessary. Your compassion is a choice. Both can coexist." I placed the frame on our mantel, a reminder of the complexity of human relationships, how love and harm can flow from the same source, how generational patterns repeat until someone finds the courage to break them. "What are you thinking?" James asked, watching me arrange the photo. "I'm thinking about healing," I replied. "Not reconciliation necessarily, but healing for us, for you, maybe someday even for her." He nodded thoughtfully. "The restraining. Order is temporary. Eventually, we'll have to decide what kind of relationship we want with her, if any." "That's a decision for another day," I said. "For now, I just want to breathe in the freedom we've created." That evening, we sat on our back patio, the same space where Vivian had slapped me months earlier, and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and pink. The property was now fully ours, the legal documents finalized that afternoon, transferring Vivian's stake to us in exchange for the court-mandated payment. "What would you have done differently?" James asked suddenly. "If you could go back to that birthday party, knowing what you know now?" I considered the question carefully. "Nothing," I finally said. As painful as that moment was, it was necessary. It brought everything into the open. It forced a confrontation that had been brewing for years. "Even the slap?" "Especially the slap," I said. "It was the moment her mask fell completely. Everyone saw her for who she truly was, including you." He reached for my hand, entwining our fingers. "I wish I had seen it sooner. Saved us both years of her manipulation." "We can't change the past," I reminded him, "but we've changed our future. That's what matters." As darkness settled around us, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had begun with public humiliation and led to profound liberation. The slap that was meant to put me in my place had instead propelled me to claim my rightful space, in my marriage, in my home, in my life. Vivian had intended that moment of physical aggression to diminish me. Instead, it had become the catalyst for growth, for strength, for a deeper connection with James than I'd ever thought possible. She had meant to break me. Instead, she had broken the chains she'd placed on both of us. "I think," I said slowly, "that sometimes you have to be pushed to your limit before you find the courage to push back. Sometimes the worst moments become turning points, if you let them." James squeezed my hand. "You turned what could have been just another painful memory into a moment of transformation." "We did," I corrected, "together." And in that moment, surrounded by the peaceful darkness of our reclaimed home, I felt something shift within me, a final release of the anger and hurt I'd carried since that slap. What remained wasn't resentment but resolution, not bitterness but clarity. Vivian had slapped me hoping to establish dominance. Instead, she had awakened my determination. She had meant to show her power. Instead, she had revealed her weakness. She had intended to preserve her control. Instead, she had lost it entirely. The irony wasn't lost on me. In her desperate attempt to maintain her grip on James's life, she had instead pushed him firmly into his own authority. In trying to drive us apart, she had bound us more tightly together. In attempting to diminish me, she had instead forced me to stand taller than I ever had before. "What are you smiling about?" James asked, noticing my expression in the fading light. "I'm smiling because sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of irony," I replied. "And because I'm grateful, not for what happened, but for what it revealed in both of us." He nodded, understanding without further explanation. "To unexpected blessings," he said, raising his glass in a quiet toast. "To unexpected blessings," I echoed, touching my glass to his. "And to the strength we didn't know we had until we needed it." Above us, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, countless points of light emerging from what had seemed like emptiness. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for how clarity often follows confusion, how strength emerges from struggle, how sometimes being struck down becomes the very thing that teaches you how to rise. 6 months passed before we heard from Vivian again. 6 months of rebuilding our lives without her shadow looming over every decision. 6 months of discovering what freedom from manipulation felt like. Sometimes exhilarating, occasionally disorienting. Always worth the struggle we'd endured to achieve it. The restraining order had expired without renewal, our choice. Not because Vivian had earned trust, but because we had reached a place where her power over us had diminished to the point where legal protection felt unnecessary. We had reclaimed our home completely, finalized the trust transfer, and established a new normal where her absence created space rather than tension. James occasionally struggled with guilt, as anyone might when severing contact with a parent, regardless of how toxic the relationship. During those moments, I reminded him that setting boundaries wasn't rejection, it was self-preservation. That loving someone from a distance was sometimes the healthiest choice for everyone involved. "Do you think she's changed at all?" he asked one evening as we prepared dinner together, a ritual that had become precious in its ordinariness. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Change requires self-awareness, and that was never Vivian's strong suit. He nodded, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. "Margaret says she's been attending therapy sessions at church. Not professional counseling, but still. It's something." I absorbed this information carefully. That's positive if she's genuinely engaging with it. "Part of me wants to believe she's capable of growth," he admitted. "Is that naive?" "It's hopeful," I corrected gently. "And hope isn't naive. It's necessary." The opportunity to test that hope arrived unexpectedly on a crisp autumn morning. The letter bore Vivian's distinctive handwriting, but unlike her previous communications, there was something different about this envelope. No return address. Demanding acknowledgement, no excessive weight suggesting legal documents, just a simple white envelope with our names. We sat at the kitchen table, the unopened letter between us like a bomb that might detonate or a gift that might delight. Impossible to know which until we crossed the threshold of opening it. "Together?" I suggested. James nodded, carefully, breaking the seal. Inside was a single page, handwritten rather than typed, the penmanship less controlled than Vivian's usual perfect script. It began without preamble. "James and Sophia, this letter has taken me 6 drafts to write. My pride fought every word. But I'm learning slowly and painfully that pride has cost me more than I can afford to lose. I am in a program now. A real one, with professional therapists, not just church counseling. It's called Family Reconciliation Therapy. Not because I expect reconciliation. I have no right to expect anything from either of you, but because I need to understand why I became the person who would strike her daughter-in-law at a birthday party. The answer isn't simple. Nothing worthwhile ever is. My therapist says I've spent a lifetime using control to mask fear, using money to replace love, using manipulation instead of honest communication. She's right. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. That would be premature and self-serving. I'm writing because part of my healing requires acknowledging the harm I've caused without expectation of absolution. Sophia, I treated you abominably from the moment James brought you home, not because of any failure on your part, but because I perceived your strength as a threat rather than a blessing for my son. I was wrong. James, I failed you as a mother by making my love conditional, by using financial control as a substitute for genuine support, by refusing to see you as an independent adult capable of making your own choices. I was wrong. I don't expect this letter to change anything between us. It shouldn't. Trust, once broken, isn't repaired with words alone. But I wanted you to know that I am facing the person I became and working to understand how to be someone better. If someday you feel ready for a conversation, I would welcome it. If not, I understand and will respect your decision either way. With genuine regret for the pain I've caused, Vivian. We sat in silence after reading, the words settling around us like falling leaves, unexpected, natural, requiring neither immediate action nor dismissal. What do you think? James finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. I reread the letter, searching for the manipulative undertones that had characterized Vivian's communications for years. They weren't entirely absent. Perhaps they never could be after decades of habitual manipulation. But something felt different, an authenticity that had been missing previously. I think, I said slowly, that this is the most honest thing she's ever written to us. Do you believe her about the therapy? I considered the question. I believe she's attending therapy. Whether she's truly doing the work or just going through the motions, that's harder to determine from one letter. He nodded, tracing the edge of the paper with his fingertip. I want to believe she's capable of change. Everyone is capable of change, I said. The question is whether they want it enough to endure the discomfort of facing themselves honestly. We decided not to respond immediately. A reaction too quick might seem dismissive. One too enthusiastic might signal a readiness for reconciliation we didn't yet feel. Instead, we tucked the letter away in a drawer, allowing its existence to settle into our consciousness without demanding action. 2 weeks later, Margaret called with an update. Vivian asked me to lunch, she said, her voice carrying a note of surprise. Just the two of us. No agenda, no discussion of you or the legal issues, just lunch. How was it? James asked, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. Strained at first, Margaret admitted. But then something remarkable happened. She apologized to me for dismissing my role in your life, for trying to erase your grandfather's memory, for treating me as an inconvenience rather than family. I exchanged glances with James, both of us processing this unexpected development. Did it seem genuine? He asked. Yes, Margaret said without hesitation. Not perfect, not without moments of defensiveness, but genuine in a way I haven't seen from her in decades. She paused. She's different, James. I can't explain exactly how, but something has shifted. After we hung up, James and I took a long walk through our neighborhood, fallen leaves crunching beneath our feet as we discussed what this might mean. Not just Margaret's assessment, but the larger question of what comes after estrangement, what healing might look like, whether reconciliation was possible or even desirable. I'm not ready to let her back into our lives, I said honestly. Not fully, not yet. Neither am I, James agreed. But I'm open to the possibility that she might actually be changing. Small steps, I suggested. If we decide to respond at all, it should be with clear boundaries and limited engagement at first. He nodded, squeezing my hand. Whatever. We decide. We decide together. A week later, we sent a brief reply, neither coldly dismissive nor warmly welcoming, just an acknowledgement of her letter and a statement that we were processing our own feelings about the possibility of future contact. No promises, no timeline, no commitment beyond consideration. Vivian's response came not in another letter, but in action, or rather, inaction. No tearful phone calls, no unannounced visits, no manipulation through other family members. Just space and silence, respecting the boundaries we'd established. It was, perhaps, the first time she had ever truly honored a limit we'd set. As winter settled over the city, bringing with it holiday obligations and the inevitable questions about family gatherings, we faced new decisions. Thanksgiving had always been at Vivian's house, Christmas Eve at ours with her in attendance. This year, those traditions felt like landmines in a field we were carefully navigating. We could host everything ourselves, James suggested as we discussed options. Invite Margaret, your sister, the cousins who've been supportive. What about your mother? I asked, the question unavoidable. He sighed, conflicted. I don't know. Part of me wants to see if the changes Margaret described are real. Another part is terrified of inviting her back into our space after everything that happened. I understood his hesitation. The last time Vivian had been in our home for a celebration, she had shattered our peace with a public assault. The memory still lingered in this space, despite all our efforts to reclaim it. What if we try neutral territory first? I proposed. Not a holiday, those carry too much emotional weight. Maybe coffee somewhere public, time-limited, with a clear exit strategy. He considered this, then nodded slowly. That makes sense. Test the waters before committing to anything more significant. The cafe we chose was busy enough to discourage dramatic scenes, but quiet enough for conversation. We arrived early, selecting a table with clear sightlines to the door and exit, a small precaution that felt necessary despite the progress suggested by Vivian's letter and Margaret's report. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her. The Vivian Shaw I. New wore power suits and perfect makeup, her hair styled immaculately, accessories chosen for maximum impact. This woman wore simple slacks and a blue sweater, minimal makeup, hair in a natural style that showed hints of gray she'd previously colored religiously. But the most striking difference was in her posture. Less rigid, less performative, as if she'd set down some invisible burden she'd carried for decades. She spotted us and paused, taking a deep breath before approaching. No confident stride, no dramatic entrance, just a woman looking nervous about meeting her son and daughter-in-law. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said, remaining standing, until James gestured to the empty chair. I wasn't sure you would. We're not sure either, James replied honestly. But we're here. An awkward silence followed as she settled herself, arranging her purse, adjusting her sweater. Familiar nervous habits I'd seen before, but without the usual undercurrent of judgment directed toward others. You look well, she finally said. Both of you. We are well, I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. How are you, Vivian? She considered the question with unexpected thoughtfulness. I'm in progress, she finally said. Some days better than others. The therapy is difficult. Facing yourself honestly isn't comfortable. Another surprise. Vivian Shaw admitting discomfort, acknowledging imperfection. The woman I knew would have claimed mastery of therapy, superior insight, exemplary progress. Margaret mentioned you've been seeing her more often, James said, testing the waters. Vivian nodded. She's been kind enough to give me another chance. More than I deserved, really. She twisted her coffee cup. Slowly. She's been telling me stories about your grandfather that I never allowed him to share when he was alive. Stories I dismissed as irrelevant. The admission hung in the air between us, a small acknowledgement of a much larger pattern of controlling. The family narrative. "Why now?" I asked, the question that had been foremost in my mind since receiving her letter. "What changed?" She met my eyes directly, perhaps for the first time without calculation or hostility. "Everything and nothing," she said. "The legal defeat, losing control of the trust, the restraining order, those were external consequences. But the real change came when I realized I was completely alone. Not just estranged from you both, but increasingly isolated from everyone." She took a sip of coffee before continuing. "Walter stopped taking my calls. Patricia canceled our standing lunch dates. Even at church, people kept a careful distance. I told myself they were disloyal, that eventually they'd come around. But weeks became months, and no one did." James shifted in his seat, his expression a complex mixture of empathy and wariness. "That must have been difficult." "It was necessary," Vivian corrected. "That isolation forced me to consider something terrifying. What if I was the problem? What if everyone else wasn't wrong?" She set down her cup with careful precision. "It's taken 6 months of twice-weekly therapy sessions to even begin to accept that reality." "And have you?" I asked. "Accepted it?" "I'm trying," she said simply. "Some days are better than others." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, stilted at times, cautiously open at others. Vivian spoke about her therapy, the childhood experiences she was processing, the patterns she was trying to recognize before they controlled her actions. She asked appropriate questions about our lives without prying, expressed interest without demanding details we weren't ready to share. Most strikingly, not once did she attempt to minimize the harm she'd caused or suggest we move past it without addressing it. When the topic of the slap finally arose, she didn't deflect or justify. "It was inexcusable," she said quietly. "Not just the act itself, but everything leading up to it. The years of undermining your relationship, the constant criticism, the attempted control. I'm deeply ashamed of who I was in that moment, and many moments before it." As we prepared to leave, she made no attempt to schedule another meeting, impose on our holidays, or extract promises for future contact. Instead, she simply thanked us for coming and expressed hope that someday we might feel comfortable enough for another conversation. Walking back to our car, James was unusually quiet, processing the interaction. "What are you thinking?" I asked. As we drove home, he considered the question carefully. "I'm thinking that for the first time in my life, I just had a conversation with my mother where I didn't feel manipulated afterward." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It was different. Not perfect, but different. "What do you think?" "About the possibility of having some kind of relationship with her again?" I took my time answering, wanting to honor both his hope and my caution. "I think we continue exactly as we've been doing. Small, controlled interactions with clear boundaries. We watch for consistency over time, not just good behavior during brief encounters." "And the holidays?" "What if we invite her to join us for dessert after Christmas dinner?" I suggested. "Not the whole day, not overnight, just a specific time frame with others present." He glanced at me, surprised. "You'd be comfortable with that?" "Comfortable isn't the right word," I admitted, "but willing to try, with appropriate safeguards. Your grandmother will be there, your cousins, my sister. People who witnessed what happened and won't let her rewrite history." We extended the invitation the following week. Specific, limited, with clear parameters. Vivian accepted graciously, without pushing for more or expressing disappointment at the constraints. Another small indication that perhaps the changes weren't merely performance. Christmas Day arrived with a light dusting of snow that transformed our neighborhood into a scene from a holiday card. Dinner with our chosen family was relaxed and joyful, free from the tension that had characterized gatherings when Vivian presided over them. As the designated time for her arrival approached, I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. A physical memory of the anxiety her presence had always triggered. James noticed, squeezing my hand beneath the table. "We can still cancel," he whispered. "One text and it's done." I shook my head. "No. We set this boundary. She accepted it. Let's see if she can honor it." Vivian arrived precisely on time, not early to assert control, not late to draw attention. She carried a small gift bag and a store-bought pie, modest offerings that signaled respect for our home rather than attempting to overshadow our efforts. "Merry Christmas," she said, handing the bag to James. "It's nothing elaborate, just something I thought you might appreciate." Inside was a photo album, not filled with manipulative images of family events we'd been excluded from, but with photographs of James as a child that we'd never seen. Him playing baseball with his grandfather, building sandcastles at the beach, moments of genuine joy captured before control had overshadowed connection. "I found these while cleaning out some old storage boxes," Vivian explained. "I thought you should have them. They belong to you, not me." It was a small gesture, but symbolically significant. Vivian voluntarily relinquishing her exclusive hold on James's history, acknowledging his right to his own memories. The evening progressed with surprising ease. Vivian sat where directed, participated in conversations without dominating them, refrained from critical comments about the house or the food or my appearance. When Margaret mentioned our plans to renovate the kitchen in the spring, Vivian didn't offer unsolicited design advice or financial assistance. She simply expressed interest in the project without attempting to influence it. As dessert concluded, and coffee was served, conversation turned to plans for the coming year. Emma mentioned her upcoming wedding. Rachel discussed a potential job change. Walter shared news about his son's college acceptance. "And what about you two?" Margaret asked, looking at James and me. "Any special plans for the new year?" James and I exchanged glances. We hadn't planned to share our news at this gathering, especially with Vivian present, but the moment felt right somehow. "Actually," I said, unable to suppress a smile, "we just found out last week. We're expecting a baby in July." The announcement was met with delighted exclamations, hugs, questions about how I was feeling, whether we wanted to know the gender. Through it all, I watched Vivian from the corner of my eye, gauging her reaction to news that would have once triggered a campaign of control disguised as helpful involvement. She remained in her seat, allowing others to offer their congratulations first. When the initial excitement settled, she spoke quietly. "That's wonderful news," she said simply. "You'll both be extraordinary parents." No commentary about her impending grandmother status, no immediate offers to redecorate a nursery, no assumptions about involvement in the pregnancy or birth, just a straightforward acknowledgement of our joy and capacity. Later, as guests began departing, Vivian prepared to leave with the others, respecting the time frame we'd established without attempting to extend it. "Thank you for including me today," she said at the door. "It meant a great deal." "Thank you for respecting our boundaries," I replied honestly. A flicker of something crossed her face, recognition perhaps of how significant that statement was. "I'm trying to learn new ways of being in relationship," she said. "It's unfamiliar territory." "For all of us," James acknowledged. As we watched her car pull away, joining the procession of departing guests, I felt a curious lightness. Not forgiveness exactly. That would require more time, more consistent evidence of change, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter. "She didn't once mention the baby being her grandchild," James observed as we closed the door. The old Vivian would have immediately claimed ownership of the news, made it about her new role. "I noticed that too," I agreed. "Small changes, but meaningful ones." That night, As we prepared for bed, I found myself reflecting on the long, difficult journey from the moment of public humiliation to this tentative peace. The slap that had seemed like an ending had instead become a beginning. Painful, but necessary, like lancing an infection to allow healing to start. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "I'm thinking about transformations," I said. "How sometimes the worst moments in our lives become catalysts for the most important changes." He nodded, understanding. "If she hadn't slapped you that night, we might still be caught in her web, just coping with it rather than breaking free." Exactly. I rested a hand on my still flat stomach, thinking about the life growing within. And now our child will know a different kind of family, one with healthy boundaries, one where love isn't conditional or controlling. "Do you think we'll ever fully trust her again?" he asked, the question that had hovered unspoken between us since receiving her letter. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Trust isn't rebuilt in months after years of violation, but I think we can create a new relationship, more limited than before, more carefully defined, but potentially healthier for everyone." He pulled me close, his hand joining mine over our growing child. "Whatever happens with her, we've already succeeded at the most important thing." "What's that?" "Breaking the cycle," he said simply. "Ensuring that the patterns stop with us, that our child grows up in a home where boundaries are respected, where love isn't a weapon or a leash." I nodded against his shoulder, feeling the profound truth in his words. Vivian's slap had been meant to put me in my place, to establish dominance, to continue a lifelong pattern of control through intimidation. Instead, it had become the catalyst for revolution, not just in our relationship with her, but in James's understanding of family dynamics, in my own commitment to self-respect, in our shared vision for the future. The hand that struck me had inadvertently broken chains neither of us had fully recognized we were wearing. The public humiliation had exposed private dysfunction that had festered for decades. The attempt to diminish me had instead diminished the power Vivian held over our lives. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt a deep gratitude, not for the pain we'd endured, but for the strength we'd discovered through enduring it. For the clarity that comes from being forced to choose between dignity and peace at any price. For the profound connection that forms when two people stand together against manipulation and emerge victorious. Vivian had slapped me hoping to teach submission. Instead, she had taught us both liberation. She had intended to demonstrate her power. Instead, she had revealed its limitations. She had meant to preserve the status quo. Instead, she had catalyzed its complete transformation. Sometimes the hand that strikes you is the hand that sets you free, not by design, but by consequence. Sometimes public humiliation becomes the first step toward private reclamation. Sometimes the moment you think might break you becomes the moment you discover just how unbreakable you truly are. And in that discovery lies not just survival, but transformation. Not just healing, but flourishing. Not just boundaries, but freedom. The freedom to build something new, something healthy, something worthy of passing on to the next generation. That, I realized as sleep finally claimed me, was the unexpected gift hidden within Vivian's slap. The opportunity to rewrite not just our story, but the stories of all who would come after us. To ensure that our child would never know the weight of manipulation disguised as love, would never mistake control for care, would grow in the sunshine of authentic connection rather than the shadow of conditional approval. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as wounds. Sometimes the path to freedom begins with a slap. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.